And here we are back at the shop doing a little wood turning. I'm Hutch, and this is wood stuff. I have a really good customer that keeps returning to me to make a lot of wood turnings for a historical home. He's even gotten an award for how well he maintains the integrity of his 1800s or something or other Victorian home. So what he brought me were these little finials, and what he gave me was a little small, and so he's wanting me to scale these up. As you can see, I'm starting here with this birch blank, roughing it out with the 3/4 inch roughing gouge, and now I'm taking the parting tool with the calipers to bring it down to 1.25 inch diameter. A lot of times I'll make multiple parts like this across to reference where I need to be to create a cylinder, and I like using a large skew as if it were a bidan or a parting tool, and just doing a peel cut across the face like what you just saw. Now here I'm grabbing my small skew and just trimming up the end so that it's nice and clean. And of course now it's time to get to the good stuff. And I use a story stick, and this is something that I measured out and made in preparation for this because I have to make 3 of them, and obviously you want them to be all identical. So quick with the pencil while it's turning, and everything's marked out. And because this finial gets pretty narrow, I'm going to start at the far end so that I have as much material as I can to stabilize it while I'm doing the turning. And again, parting down to the diameter of the top little onion shaped finial, I then clean it up with the parting tool. Give me a rough diameter, and now I incise a new reference line since I've now removed the pencil mark. I'm having a little trouble deciding which tool to get. For some reason my mind was a little foggy, but nothing a little coffee didn't fix. So here I go referencing the next major element, bringing it down to kind of just an eyeball diameter. And now I'm removing some of the excess material so that it won't be in my way once I go back and start shaping that onion pointed finial top. And again, trying to use as good technique as possible, rolling the tool from its side down to its belly. Obviously you see here again the technique coming from the tall edges and scooping down to the bottom of the cove. And as I'm doing this, you can sort of see my body in the background. I'm using my body as the stabilizing force and what I use to actually move through those cuts to keep them smooth. Now here I go to do some of the beginning shaping, roughing out that finial. And as I go through this, I sneak up on the final form. I have something that I have to match, and I look up as I do this at the form and look down at my workpiece to see if I'm getting an equivalent shape. And here, as I get close to that tip, I have to slow way down because the velocity of the wood turning at the axis of rotation is very slow. So I got to give the tool time to cut. We bring it down to a really fine, precise point. Now I'm going to start working my way towards the headstock, completing the rest of the finial. Just doing a little final shaping here. Really dial in that form to match the existing. Just a little round over. And then I bring in my parting tool to clean up that incised cut, making it really sharp and crisp. Now you'll see here this is a homemade scraper. One of the things that I have found really important is to keep old tools that I've ground down to a nub around, because I never know when I need to make my own special tool. So instead of having to buy a very small round nose scraper, I was able to just grind it out of an old bowl gouge, and here you see how well it's working. Now the reason I needed it this small is for something later on in this project where it's got a very, very, very small, tight radius cove that I have to sneak into. Again, here I'm just holding the tool with as much force, with as little force as possible, while still maintaining control. Incise the line again, going back to my parting tool, again giving my tool clearance for the next element in this form. And now we can begin shaping the main body. And again, we have another little round over, so I'll try to keep things as crisp and clean as possible. Now some people here might be able to use a small skew, and you don't have to use as big of a spindle gouge as I'm using here, but I've found that in most cases I can use this 1/2 inch bowl gouge or spindle gouge for most work, even little tight elements just like you saw there, as long as it's not stuck in a space that's smaller than the diameter of this tool. Again, just trying to create a nice smooth cut, righting the bevel. And again, just doing a little bit of refining here, sneaking up on the right shape. I was noticing that the apex was a little bit off where I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be a little closer to the tip, so I'm bringing the apex of this curve a little farther to what would be my right, or as you're seeing it, your left. Now I'm going to part down the side of the very base of it to define the bead that's going to be done right at the base, and you see here I'm cutting down just again to give me clearance. And coming back with the skew, I clean that up right to the line, and I undercut it slightly so that when the tenon's formed and it's dropped into its final place on the finished workpiece, it'll set completely flat. Here I'm not using calipers, I'm just kind of eyeballing the diameter I want, and then I roll the bead nice and smoothly, again using my body as the means of control throughout the cut. A little refining here, light passes. And now this is where this specialty tool had to be made. This scraper is very narrow, and this space is ultra tiny and very deep in relation to the rest of the piece. I wouldn't be able to get that 1/2 inch spindle gouge in here without quite a bit of trouble or making a mess of things. And again, just lightly holding the tool and letting the scraper do a gentle removal of material as I go along. Again, doing a little round over on that element. And we stop the lathe, take a look. Yep, looking good. And now it's time to do a little bit of sanding before I do the final tenon while it's got as much wood as possible, keeping it stable and preventing it from chattering and things like that. Now this is just 100 grit sandpaper. These are probably going to be painted, even though they're made out of birch, nice hard birch. Still, 100 grit's fine. I don't need to go to a finer grit. Now, I don't have a variable speed lathe, so I just was continuing to do this at 1800 RPMs. When you do that, it loads the sandpaper very quickly, and it's one of those things where I go through a lot of sandpaper as a result. Of course, the other thing to keep in mind is that the RPMs in relation to this piece are on the low side, but I don't mind it, and it seems to work fine regardless. And this also is being done in reverse. I did stop the lathe and put it in reverse. Makes it easier to do the sanding. Otherwise, if I had it turning forward, I would have to remove the tool rest and banjo so as it wouldn't catch my sandpaper fingers and pinch it between the workpiece and the tool rest. So I just noticed here that part of this curve seemed like it needed a little more refining, and I wanted to make the little element a little bit narrower. And here I'm coming back to clean that up again, round it over a little more. Just dialing things in at this point. It's looking pretty good. I think that turned out pretty nice. So at this point, the last little final sanding. And in just a minute or two, we'll be ready to make the tenon. And here we go. A lot of times using a standard wrench, you can use those as your calipers to set the diameter of your tenons, and it works out really well. But what I found is, in most cases, if I drilled a 3/8 hole to put this tenon in, it tends to be on the tight side. So when it's being installed, it may need a little bit of sandpaper on the tenon just to bring it down just a little bit in order to be able to slip into a hole. And again, coming back with the skew just to clean up that last little bit and make sure that it's concave so it'll set nice and flush when it's ready to be installed. Clean up a little fuzzy, and we're all done. I'm pretty happy with that. Well, thanks for watching. This is Wood Stuff with Hutch. Please subscribe, and I'll see you next time.